recording. So.
Well, thank you, Summer. Much appreciated.
Sorry, I have too many windows open. I
No,
need
that's all right. It's all
the right
good.
one to share.
Thank you so much.
There we go.
All right. Have something. We still see the closed window.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Give me 1 second.
But as you're doing that, so I would like to, again, want to welcome you here to this session, and Summer, thank you for that introduction. I want to check in with you first and foremost. How are you doing, right? How are you doing right now in this moment? So if you feel inclined, please enter a word or phrase in the chat, and we'll sort of read those off of how you're doing right now. So I want to check in with you. So how are you doing? Put a word chat in there. Tired, happy, anxious about this whole transition. How are you feeling right now? What comes to mind? Overwhelmed? Absolutely. Nervous? Yes. Anxious and excited? Yes, it is. Anxious and happy? Themes are emerging here. So any more thoughts of how you're doing right now? No, we want to do that to check in, right? And that we'll be talking about this throughout our conversation today. And part of that is understanding what the wellness journey is, or the well-being, how we define it here at Pitt. So Summer, if you want to hit to our next slide there.
Absolutely. Does that look
Tearful? Yes.
wonderful?
I experienced that too as well when my college age folks went to college, no doubt. So well-being, we like to use this framework, and this is how the institution is moving, right? So what we want to define well-being and how we approach student wellness. Well-being is the optimal and dynamic state that allows people to achieve their full potential. And there's two specific aspects of well-being, right? There's the individual well-being and the community well-being. And you can see there that is really the individual well-being is your own perception. How do you see your well-being? Generally happy or satisfying, right? Then there's also one's contribution to community, and also is one's human rights or needs being met. Then you look at community well-being, which sort of definitely is parallel to that, is that relationship and connectedness. Summer sort of mentioned that with Welcome Week and things that will be happening there to ensure that your students are connected in the Pitt experience. Perceived quality of life for all people in the community, how well the community meets the needs of all our members. We'll be talking about that here. And also multifaceted goal and goals and sharing responsibility, right? So this is a shared responsibility for student wellness. So not only from our team, from the Division of Student Affairs, but across the campus community. You'll find that student well-being is the most important thing it was one of the most important things here at the University of Pittsburgh. And well-being is multidimensional, right? And so we have these pillars, and we'll talk about where you can find all this information here shortly. But there's physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, environmental, financial, occupational, and social. Those are the pillars. And that is really how wellness is developed. It's that journey through these pillars that help us all sort of achieve our optimal and achieve our full potential. All right, Summer, you go to the next slide. So just to give you an overview of our departments here at the University of Pittsburgh for this. So student wellness or wellness is made up of 4 departments: campus recreation, care and resource support team, student health services, and the University Counseling Center. Campus recreation encompasses all our recreational activities. We're really excited about our new facility that's being built, which will be open in 2024, hopefully fall 2024. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a focal point of our campus and our well-being experience here at Pitt, which will integrate all these departments into one center, albeit we will have offices throughout the campus community. And our care and resource support team is that team that really helps students navigate sort of unexpected challenges that sort of have come into play that may sort of deter some of their well-being efforts, right? And also some of their academic goals. Of course, Student Health Services provides a full range of health services to students. You think about your provider back at home or where you are, as well as sort of other sort of ongoing needs for students. Also, the University Counseling Center, a full-service outpatient center that really meets the students' needs where they are. No session limits, no wait time. Those services are available. And I also like to point out too, with the student health services, in conjunction with the counseling center, we do have psychiatry support as well. All right. So just a couple sort of resources now here, right? Where have all these resources? The first place I would say to start is Thrive at Pitt. Thrive at Pitt is thrive.pitt.edu. Go to that site. It's broken down into pillars. It's a one-stop shop for all the resources. So please share that with your student and please have that handy for yourself, right? And then also I'd like to mention a few other things, as you're considering, sort of your students' time here, and as you're all talking about sort of this experience here at Pitt. One thing we like to point out is well-being, right? Because I know when I was a college student, right, I may have had meals throughout the entire week, but I didn't have the meal plan for the weekend, right? For various reasons. So I had to figure out how to sort of manage that, particularly in residence hall, right? So you had to figure out how to manage that and ensure that you were eating and maybe you're spending money out at restaurants and so on and so forth. So what we have done here at Pitt, we have a Pitt Eats decision tool that helps families understand what meal plans are available, what works best for your situation and needs. And we strongly encourage y'all to consider the plans that will make sure that your students are not hungry over the course of time. We do have services under our basic needs, and that's under our care and resource support office that can help out if students are food insecure or need some emergency assistance or emergency meals. We do have that available and some pantry goods and so on and so forth here on campus. The other thing I want you to consider is your health insurance. Consider your options for health insurance. Many providers provide what's called guest policies or visiting policies or travel policies for students, right? So please contact your insurance carrier to figure out what would be the best so your students are fully covered as if they were back home with you. The other thing to consider too as well is there's also an option for the student health insurance through UPMC too as well to supplement those plans if you so choose. That may be the best option for you. Now, there's also the power of Pitt. It has all the COVID information, testing, those type of things, masking requirements, and so on and so forth. That's at coronavirus.pitt.edu. So those are the 4 sort of resources I want to provide to you. And then we can also drop some links in the chat too as we go. And before we turn it over sort of question and answer and have a conversation, let's go to some hacks and tips to supporting your students' well-being. So the first thing is woosah, right? I see a lot of anxiousness, nervousness, right? Feeling overwhelmed. Take some time to take some deep breaths in. For those of you who are familiar with yoga, use those deep yoga breaths and let it out, right? And take some time, and I have this on the front and the back, and take care of yourself. So that's the part of the woosah moment, right? Enjoy the time together that you have with your student before they arrive here at Pitt, whether it's for new students, whether you have returning students, please enjoy that time together with your student and keep it light, right? And then also talk about with your student, how do you want to stay connected, right? When you arrive here on campus, when your student arrives here on campus, what does that look like? And that goes to the check-ins, right? When I say stay connected, it's about phone, text, however you want to communicate on social, whatever it is for you and your family. How do you want to communicate to be able to stay connected and to facilitate those check-ins? Also continue to have those difficult conversations, right? So those are around those expectations. What is expected, right? And having that collaborative discussion with your student, right? Because this will also focus in on autonomy too as well, because they're young adults now. We want them to grow. We want them to I say this to because I've college age children as well. to say, hey, there's some things I have trouble letting go, right? But we need to have those difficult conversations so we can continue that dialogue and you understand the expectations. And also what you're doing here now, which is fabulous, is sort of being knowledgeable of campus resources. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. Talk about being, that autonomy is crucial. So allow a little space, right? Be a coach, right? And this is getting back to being less directive and sort of being that coach. Ask questions, right? Stay engaged, but not too many, right? Because we want to not sort of overwhelm our students and say, oh yeah, here comes my parent again, asking me all these questions. I really don't want to answer them. I'm going to tell them what they want to hear, and so on and so forth. So we want to be able to give that space, but still have that feel. And also expect change. Pitt is a very exciting place to be. And there's a lot of different things going on, not only in Pitt proper, but throughout Pittsburgh and the communities, right? So expect change, expect sort of different views that may come up, and wanted to talk with you about that. That's where that's staying connected. That's where that's having those difficult conversations. Their views may change, right? From there. But from that, I want you to be able to trust your student too as well. Again, I find that difficult too at times. So trusting your student is crucial in building that trust. And again, want to finish up by saying, take care of yourself, right? And this is the whole part of well-being, because as you're taking care of yourself, your students will begin to see that. And by leading by example, they will begin to tap into these resources and begin taking care of themselves. All right. So that's just a quick overview. And I'm here to answer any questions, talk through anything that if we don't have the answers, we will definitely find it and follow up with you too as well.
Dr. Darr, I'm just going to share that I'm going to spend some time putting those links from the PowerPoint into the chat. And so if you want to, as you go through the Q&A, I'm just going to mute and be
all right.
Things
Cool.
in the chat.
Gotcha. I'm watching the chat here. So what questions do you have?
Check out joepillow.com. That's Joe.
Any questions from folks?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
How do we know like what insurances the health center takes, or do we just do that through our insurance? And what would be the process of maybe making a health appointment or counseling appointment?
Great questions. Thank you for that. Very important questions, right? So the Student Health Center does take most health insurances, right? Most common health insurances. If there's some concerns or issues, we try to work with the insurance companies to try to get reimbursed, but that's done through that process, right? So we do take all the major insurances, Cigna, Aetna, TRICARE. So those are some of the things that we take. Blue Cross Blue Shield, of course, UPMC. So we do take those insurances. And I would, in order for us to ensure that, again, circling back with your insurance company to say if there's a guest or a travel policy or student policy that you can tap into through your plan would be the first thing. And for making an appointment, for student health, you can just call. Once the student is on campus, or if there is a need, they can just call our student health services or go to the link and check in with them. For counseling, it's the same thing, available 24/7. You can call the counseling center to get connected with the clinician, and your student can discuss their unique needs and be able to be supported, and an individualized plan will be developed for your student. And there's no, on the counseling center side, no insurance is being charged on the counseling center side. So that's included in the cost of attendance. But we do charge on the student health center side for those appointments and psychiatry. So we have a question in the chat, and we'll jump over there. How does Pitt identify students who aren't transitioning well during their first year? Very important question. So this is where we do, particularly when for our residence life team, what we have been piloting over the last year is called a wellness concierge, right? So the wellness concierge check in. So they're made up of RAs and other folks in residence life. So they check in. There's an intentional check-in process with every student to ensure that they are connected to university, to programs and activities that are going on. If they are still having some difficulties, some referrals we may refer the student to the counseling center, or we may refer them to the care and resource support team for additional support services or to help them get connected further. Other questions? And of course, someone just put in the welcome week activities. So please encourage your student to engage in those activities. Try something new, right? Because again, Pitt's a different space than what they're used to, right? No matter what size of high school that they came from, it's just different. So we're encouraging students this is part of the journey of exploring, right? That's where the excitement comes in. It could be awkward, it could be challenging at a time. We want folks to lean into that. We want students to lean into that experience, particularly during Welcome Week, and enjoy those activities. What else?
Jay, there's a question in the chat. I think it got bumped as I posted.
Okay.
I posted a whole paragraph. I'm sorry. Does Pitt give out flu shots?
Absolutely. Great question. Yes, we do. We do our flu shot kickoff at our Healthy Youth Fair, which is September 14th. Students are welcome to come over. It's usually done here at the William Pitt Union on the William Pitt Union Plaza. So those are available, and they're also available through our hub, which is our it's our what's called COVAX vaccine clinic, but it's now called the hub, and that's where vaccines are available not only for COVID but also for flu too as well throughout the year. So if they missed that, there's opportunities ongoing to receive flu shots.
There's also a question in the chat about getting access to a student's schedule. Understand that might not be necessarily a wellness or well-being question.
It could be a well-being question, right? So no, I appreciate that. The question I would think is, going back to those tips, right? So what's the level of autonomy that you want to have, and what are the expectations that you want to have with your student, right? Because we want to sort of give them space to learn and grow and to do some adulting, right? So you may want to ask them for their schedule instead of saying, hey, can we gain access to that, right? Or getting their password. For us to release any information, there has to be a release sign by your student, a FERPA release, to allow access for you as parents and as families to have access to their records. So what I would encourage is as another path is to ask your student for that schedule, and see if they can provide it for you. And again, it's an and, it's not a but, excuse me. It's an and. Allow some autonomy for your student here to sort of adjust and have that experience of sort of managing their academic pursuits. And what I'll also say as folks are formulating questions, I'm going to say this, and parents may say, like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Like, failure is okay. So if a student fails an exam, if your student doesn't do as well as they thought in the semester, right? That's okay. That's part of the journey. And what that helps build is resilience, right? And understanding what they want to do. Because what we want to do here at Pitt, I know you've seen this, forge your own path, right? That forge your own path is really about playing into your students' strengths, right? We may have expectations as parents, I know I have, and still have to a certain extent, of where we think our students should be studying, or what major they should be pursuing, and what type of job they should have, and so on and so forth. Those expectations may not align with theirs, right? So I think allowing that space to have that conversation with your student will allow that whole process and reduce the amount of failure that happens, or not as successful as they want to be. Because if you begin to play to your strengths, those areas of improvement will begin to diminish, and the passion for learning and growing will take shape and hold. So that's part of the wellness piece, as well as allowing your students to have that space to try something and not succeed. I'm sure many of us have done that in the past. And I will tell you this, a lot of students, the statistics tell us, research tells us that over 75% of students would change their major twice. And of course, I'm the exception to that rule. I changed it 4 times. So be open to that sort of exploration. I understand there's some financial constraints, right? There's that, the cost of attendance and all that. I think that's part of that dialogue and expectations that you have, but allowing space for your student to sometimes not be as successful as you think they ought to be. Any tips you can give us to first-time parents? We will take any advice. Wow, yes. The one thing I would say, and this is the most difficult thing to do, is to let go, even if it's just a little bit, right? If it's one thing to let go of for your student as they come to campus, let that go. And that's different for everybody. I'm not saying let them go entirely, but let one thing go, because that builds sort of that trust. And what I mean by trust, right? Over the last 17, 18 years, you all have worked with your students to build values, right? And sort of things, those values of your families and how to sort of operate in this, in many different spaces. Trust your student that they will be able to do that, right? They will get their lumps along the way. There's no doubt about that. The question is, what can you let go of? And again, take care of yourself. Have some time for yourself to allow yourself to, because actually it's a loss in a way, right? Because it's not the same student that your same child that was 2 years ago. They have changed now, right? So allow that space to happen and grow. It will be bumpy, it will be awkward. Again, just lean into that process. And by you leaning into it and sort of expressing it, that's helpful for you and your student or child. Can parents sign a form to make Pitt release any health-related concerns and to allows us to make the health-related decisions in the worst-case scenarios? In emergency situations, we do call emergency contacts. If you're listed as emergency contact, we will call you. Students are adults, and in the state of Pennsylvania, we'll hit mental health first. Mental health, students can consent to mental health treatment at age 14, right? For medical decisions, yes, they're 18 years or older, HIPAA applies, and so on and so forth. So your students will have to be able to sign a consent to release information. In emergency situations, of course, that's one of the limits of confidentiality, that we will notify emergency contacts in case of emergency scenarios that may happen. How long does it typically take for a new student to get acclimated? That's a great question. I wish I had the answer for that. We'd be making a lot of money over here, right? I think all of us would be, right? That really depends on your student, right? And how they engage and how they interact with folk, right? And it's really dependent, right? And I think what we can do for that to help a student acclimate from you to help support us is that encouragement, right? Not saying you should have or you should have, could have, would have. Just say encourage, right? Hey, I saw this event out here. You may want to sort of participate in it. I saw that there's Recomania during Welcome Week. Did you go up to Recomania, right? Or there was a event coming up during Mental Health Awareness Month. Did you check that out, right? So being aware of resources and what's going on, Pittwire is a great resource for that, for all the activities or lectures. Even through Pitt Arts, we have a great arts community here. There's either low cost or no cost tickets that folks can go see some very like plays, concerts, exhibits, and so on and so forth. And I believe, Summer, if I'm not mistaken, museums are free for students, if I'm correct.
Yes, with their
yep,
Pitt ID.
with their Pitt ID, right? So students can go to the museums, which are literally a block away, right? A lot of the museums and things are a block away. So it really depends on your students, but I would say encourage them to engage, right? Not sort of pressure them to engage, but sort of those conversations and say, hey, are you being connected? Do you know about this? And so on and so forth. Not you should go do this. Again, that's that directive, but being more of a coach or a guide through this process.
Also, if your student is living in the residence halls, our student staff in the residence halls, our resident assistants, our RAs, especially during the beginning of the year, they will have built-in programming. They will be inviting their floor to all of the things that Dr. Darr has covered, all of those activities on campus. And so encouraging your student to say yes to invitations, to say yes to those things, even though they might make them nervous. And the RAs, that programming will ebb and flow throughout the entire semester if they're living on campus. And we also have programs that are encouraged and provided at times for our commuter students as well. They should be
Absolutely.
saying yes to those invitations and finding someone else to invite. Because if we remind them, all first year students are feeling the way they are, right? It's
Yeah.
all brand new.
Yeah. And we've been through it, right? So any tips for an easy move-in day, right? Patience. Patience is the number one tip. And I would also encourage you to think about the space too in your students' residence hall. Again, these are not large spaces, right? And if there's a roommate or two in those spaces, then you have to consider that. So be mindful. I know there's lists on our housing website of suggestions on what to bring, what not to bring. So follow those guides that we have out there. That will ease the move-in process for you and your student, right? Because we know some folks do come with moving trucks, literally, with stuff, right? So, or U-Hauls attached to the back, right? The spaces aren't that large to hold all that furniture and belongings that folks want to bring with them. Too as well. So patience and remembering the space.
Yeah, and consider what you could get like on a Target run after you've been able to evaluate the space, what you
Yes.
may be able to mail or ship. I mean, Jennifer, I know you, so I know that I could run it down to your daughter because we're neighbors. But think about how you might be able to get things as seasons change in Pennsylvania, and they may need different apparel. And patients at the elevators. The elevators and towers especially are packed and busy. And I also think be prepared to experience your student on move-in day, and their emotions are going to be different than yours, and they're going to be high. I think being prepared, like Jay said, to really take some deep breaths through the things that they're feeling. Because I think we see it as we help with move-in, and we see sort of the family dynamics and emotions are elevated on that day, and just respecting that there's lots of feelings and emotions. And my other smooth transition tip is to take a photo with your student. I always tell students this as they are sort of like, Mom, I'm not taking a photo in front of the cathedral. I'm not doing this with you. And I remind them that it's like the first day of kindergarten photo. It's not for the student. It's for their support system. It's for the parent. It's for the family. It's for the grandparent. And so take the photo so that you have the memory, even though in the moment the memory might feel really heavy and really emotional. Take the photo.
And that may be some of the things you want to talk about. Yeah, you say, hey, no, we're definitely gonna get one photo, right? As far as the expectation on moving day, we'll get one photo. I know you want to give me the Heisman or a stiff arm that you don't want to be around, right? You, as I'm moving in, I want to be, I just want to go ahead with my floor mates and so on and so forth, just to hang out. So you're gonna get some of that. So maybe that's setting up and say, hey, before you go out and do what you do, let's get a photo either by Kathy or by the Panther or something, right? To commemorate the day. In the past years, what are the top wellness concerns you have seen through for our first year students? Wow, that's another important question. And some of you have said, some of the themes came up in when I asked you the question, right? Anxiety, nervous, right? Not thinking they should be here, sort of that imposter syndrome, right? Not feeling I'm good enough for Pitt based on what they're seeing around them, right? With other students. There's the Again, not, am I making the connections I should be, right? Sort of that pressure on, I should be doing all these types of things while I'm at Pitt. I need to get it all in right now. And my suggestion is no, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint, to use another sort of analogy or exercise analogy. This is a marathon. So taking it slow, right? Having that patience, I think, is another theme for students. And they're at Pitt. No, you belong, right? There's not a question. Your student is coming to Pitt, they belong. And we want to encourage that belongingness through a lot of our offices here in student affairs and throughout the campus community to ensure students are connected and they find their community. I think that's the other thing, not being anxious about not saying I'm doing this in the amount of time I should be doing it. And I think that's part of that expectation conversation having with your student and saying, let's pace yourself, right? Because one thing I learned, and this is one thing, because academic stress is there too, right? For example, if I'm coming in as pre-med, I know I want to take all these hours of all these courses, right? My recommendation in order, because this is not a Navy SEAL training camp, right? We want your student to be healthy, right? So here's where, and me with the 4 majors, I can speak to this, right? You can't, because I started out as an engineering major and took all the hard classes my first 2 semesters and didn't do too well, right? So because I wasn't acclimated, I didn't give myself time to acclimate to the environment, to this whole new learning experience. So if your students can, right? If they can reduce some of their course load, Pitt is not going anywhere. You don't have to complete it in 3.5 years, 4 years, right? I understand there's a cost of attendance, but I think the health of your student and the well-being of your student is the most important thing as they go through this journey, right? And, we like to say that college would be the best experience of your life. I think that's a misnomer, because college is all that. It's a good experience and it's not a good experience. A lot of things ebb and flow. So just having your students prepare for that and setting those expectations, can they reduce their course load during their freshman year to be able to acclimate to the university, boost up their GPA, because if you boost up your GPA, it's really hard to knock it back down to a lower level of where somebody's on probation and so on and so forth. So being able to sort of, how can I reduce my course load? How can I take some of those less rigorous courses right now so I can give myself a chance to acclimate to Pitt in this new environment that I'm in. So just to recap, anxiety, sort of that imposter syndrome. Do I belong here? Sort of making those connections, that isolation, right? And of course, over the last 2 years of the last 2.5 years with COVID and everything like that, that has been there. And also the timing piece. And I like to say this real quick as we're moving forward. Your student will say, I don't have time to do X, right? I don't have time to do these things. I always have to study. What I like to do with students is say, how many hours are in a week, right? So there's that 168. You have 168 hours in a week, right? The things to think about that are most important to you are taking care of yourself, right? Making sure that's a priority, making sure you give time and space to sort of recharge, regroup as you're going throughout your day, even if it's for 30 minutes, even if it's for 30 seconds, right? Just to take time to breathe, take time to look at the crazy squirrels running around on the lawn, right? So just do that. That is helpful for folks to be able to re-engage, right? So looking at your well-being, going back to 168, it may be interesting to sit down with your students if you have, going back to the schedule piece, right? So students on average take about 15 hours in a semester, right? So that's actually 15 hours in the classroom. The general rule is 2 to 3 hours per credit hour that one needs to study. That's the general rule, right? So if you add that up, if your student is working 20 hours, if your student is doing some other extracurricular activities, if you add all that up, there is at least, out of that 168, I would say there's on average for any student that we do, particularly the first year students who come in, there's at least 2 to 3 hours a day. This accounting for studying, sleeping, eating, all that, 2 to 3 hours a day for them to focus on themselves. So if you begin to do that math at 168, that would be helpful to the students to say, hey, wait a minute, no, I have time to engage in some of these activities. I have time to do what I like to do to sort of recharge and take a break. All right, what else? Any questions around masking, COVID, anything like that? Again, all that information, somebody to drop some of those links in the chat for you with the power of Pitt. Please don't look at those sites. They provide all the up-to-date information around COVID and how we're proceeding with arrival testing. And for folks who are unvaccinated and have exemption, there's also some testing protocols there too as well.
Hi, this is Susan.
Yes, Susan.
I have a concern / question. My daughter has a housing assignment in Lothrop Hall. She was a little disappointed initially because she really wanted to be in the hub of the towers. And I'm just thinking that now she's somewhat disconnected, like even for meals, she has to like travel outdoors. In the winter, she's got to actually put on a winter coat and travel to go get meals. Or is there some other, are there other options near Lothrop or over on that area of campus that kind of help the students that are on that end of town?
That's a great question. Lothrop actually is only about a block and a half away from Towers. I mean, it's literally that close. It's down a hill and across the street, but it's really that close to Pitt East. And there's also, of course, there's plenty of space, plenty of restaurants and things just in the Oakland area within a two block radius that accepts the sort of meal plans or Panther funds for folks. So yeah, it's really that close. So it's not that far away from where the dining facility is, where Pitt Eats is in Towers.
Right. We attended orientation. She attended orientation, Panther Connect, a couple weeks ago. So we were able to acclimate to the campus, but it's just not as easy as going downstairs to the eatery.
Yeah, that's convenient. No doubt, that's convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that is
nothing
definitely
similar to that.
No, there's no
Lothrop.
dining facility. Unfortunately, there's no dining facility in Lothrop. But there are, of course, it's just that literally, yeah, it's far, it's not as convenient as Pitt Eats, but there's opportunities for other, even right across the street, some folks take Panther funds in restaurants. So
Thank you.
yes, you're welcome. All right. Question in the chat: how easy is it to get connected to a counselor for regular counseling? Okay, for the University Counseling Center, if your student calls 412-648-7930, they can get connected to a clinician, and they can come into the drop-in hours, whether it's a virtual appointment or in person, to meet with a clinician to discuss their unique needs. The Counseling Center is a short-term outpatient facility, right? There are some opportunities there based on the student's needs for some long-term care or some bridge work to get them connected if that's what their unique needs are. So we do have that option, and there's also some other programs that we do have. Again, that is that bridge work. We also have dialectical behavioral program. We also have some programs that we partner in our Next Step program that bridges folks to higher levels of care with some of our colleagues here throughout the Pittsburgh area. So there is some options for longer term treatment or higher levels of care. But generally, the Counseling Center is a short-term model for counseling. There's no wait list. There is no, it doesn't take anything but to give a call and then stop over to Counseling Center. You can do virtual appointments or in person. Yes, students in the residence halls do. So every student will be given a test kit from Color Health, and the student will need to complete it as soon as possible. do that test, drop it off in the bin, and then they're done. So so they'll have that in their room or in the residence hall. You'll be directed to where those are, and then your student will complete the test and drop it off. So yes, that is a requirement for students in residence halls. And we strongly encourage students to use a antigen test or rapid test with 48 hours or 48 hours plus before coming to campus. What other questions? Any other questions that surface for folks? And we strongly encourage students to support Pitt at the Backyard Brawl against WVU on Thursday, September 1st. So that's a thing. And buses go to I can't remember what it's Acrisure Stadium. I was getting ready to say Heinz Field. So buses will be available to transport students to Acrisure Stadium. What is the masking policy? The parent page has said is different. Okay. So what happens with masking, right? So Pitt follows the guidance that comes out of Allegheny Health Department. So if the levels are high, the masking is required indoors, right? So if it's low or moderate, masking may be suggested, but it's not required. So we really are focused on, and this is on the Power of Pitt website on the top right-hand side of the page that says that details for each of our campuses, if you're in high, medium, or elevated. I believe those are, yeah, high, medium, elevated. So those are out there on the Power of Pitt that you can look at, and those are the masking requirements. And that changes, right, depending on the health department's assessment of what's happening here in Allegheny County. And we'll make sure everything is good to go in the parent page. If you can send us the link where that is, so we can make sure that gets corrected, because it should mirror our Power of Pitt website.
Jay, there's another question right above my,
Okay.
will families be able to move into the halls to assist students moving in? Will be able to be in the halls to assist with move-in without testing?
Without testing, yes, yes. So the testing is only for your student. And depending on where we are with the levels here in Allegheny County, masks may or may not be required inside the residence hall by the time move-in happens.
Yeah, so I want to go back to Jennifer's question. Is masking required in the residence halls also? They will be required indoors if Allegheny County is still at that high status. So you should continue to check the Power of Pitt, the coronavirus.pitt.edu website up until like check it move-in day morning of whatever is your assigned day. And then there's another question. Is testing just done on move-in day, or will tests be conducted on a routine weekly basis going forward?
Excellent question. Testing for everybody in the residence halls will take place during that time. Now, there's some caveats, and we'll sort of dive in a little bit of the weeds here. So if your student tested positive within the last 90 days, I know there was a survey that went out, a link that they could fill out, and that's actually due by the 17th. For folks to say if they were positive in the last 90 days, then they'll receive an exemption from testing. If they tested positive or they had COVID within the last 90 days, and they have to state that information in that link on that form that was sent out, and it has to be in by August 17th. So once we have that information, student will be exempt from testing again if they were positive and with COVID. Then from there, students who are, and this is the other caveat, students who have an exemption who are unvaccinated and they live in residence halls will be required to test weekly. So if your student has an exemption or applied for exemption and they're unvaccinated for the vaccine requirement, then they will be tested weekly. Required to test weekly. And there's Color Health. It's the same test kit that they will do upon arrival that they will do on a weekly basis. Was another part of that question. I think I mentioned that. So overall for the campus, no, there's not a sort of ongoing weekly testing, only for those who have unvaccinated and have an exemption. Now it's become required. Are they provided or should we pack a supply for moving? We will have masks on hand, but it never hurts to have more, right? Because things do change and masks are used rather quickly. What happens if a roommate gets COVID? Are there any treatment options available? Absolutely, there's okay, so we do have limited sort of isolation housing. So the general rule, what we did in the spring was students who tested positive for COVID, who have COVID, will isolate in place, again, for 5 days, and then masking after for the additional 5, which equals 10 days in total. So they will isolate for 5 days, and then after that isolation, of course, they will mask while they're out and about in the community for that. And then, yeah, treatment is available. We do have that available. All the therapeutics are available here through our pharmacy. So those are available not only our pharmacy, but CVS and other sort of commercial pharmacies too as well. And of course, you have the care from our health department. And of course, UPMC is right in the center of, as part of our campus for additional support if needed. Yeah, the power of Pitt. All right, we got that. All right, cool. Anything else about COVID or testing or that has come up for you? And just to repeat, get a mask again, when the community level is high, and again, this is dictated by Allegheny County, then masks are required when this community level is high. Masks are optional when it's mild, when the community levels are medium and low. So just want to make sure that's clear.
There's a question, is it still required to swipe ID to enter buildings?
Great question. Depends on your building, right? Not all buildings require swipe, but most do to enter your building through through our guest services or our security folk. So you would have to swipe in to get into the building. That's most buildings. Other buildings, depending on the style of them, may just have a lock and key, but those are few and far between. Most of them require either a swipe and or putting in a code to access the building.
And Jay, if we could provide clarification, because I think there's probably really 2 things about that question.
Yeah.
For our residence halls, as you were describing, many of them have that security guard booth. But for if you're thinking about COVID protocols like the student union, that swipe system has
Oh yes, great
gone,
point.
right? Okay.
Yeah, there's no sort of swipes to get in any of the university buildings at all.
For our guests.
For our guests,
I'm not sure which one
too.
you were asking, but wanted to
Yeah.
provide, there's really 2 answers now.
Yes, there is. Yes. Other questions as we're sort of winding up here? Okay. Well, we definitely appreciate your time. Really appreciate the questions. Please know that you can always reach out to me and Summer with any questions that you have. Happy to support you in your student, not only through the transition, but through their whole journey here at the University of Pittsburgh. We are here to support your student. We care about your student, and we want to make sure that they are successful and are well, right? So please don't hesitate to reach out with any follow-up questions. Summer.
Thank you, Dr. Darr, so much. So we'll be doing this monthly. We'll always have that registration link so you can have the Zoom information, and we'll do them the second Wednesday of every month. However, just as Dr. Darr said, as your questions come up, as your students' questions come up, we are here as resources. I had left my email address, parents@pitt.edu. Send me questions, connections, things that you may need as the support system for your students. We are so excited to welcome you, your family, and your student to campus in just a number of days. Lots of deep breaths and excitement, and congratulations. Welcome to the Pitt family.
Yeah, welcome to Pitt, H2P. Take care.
Well, thank you all.